Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar, How to Conduct a Bid Review. My name's Andrew Watson, and I'm joined by my colleague, Alistair O'Donnell, and we'll be running you through this webinar on this rather lovely, rather sunny Thursday lunchtime. At least it is here, and if it's sunny here, it probably is where you are because we tend to collect the worst weather in the country anyway. Hopefully, across the next sort of 45 minutes to an hour, what we'll be able to do is provide some value around the topic of conducting bid reviews. So when you're putting together your hard constructed, long thought over submissions, what steps that you can take to make sure when they go in, they are going to be as high quality as possible. Just a couple of housekeeping things, and then we'll do introductions. There is a chat function, folks, and there's also a question function. We're using a new version of the tech today, so hopefully I'll be able to keep on top of that sort of stuff. But do feel free at any point during the webinar to ask questions and to put comments or questions into the chat function as well. And we'll try and, if we get appropriate points, to kind of break up the flow of the webinar by answering some of those. So the idea is we'll get as much as we can from everybody. There's a very large number of people on the call today, so hopefully we've struck a right chord in terms of the topic, and hopefully we'll continue to do so with the content as well. I'll just introduce myself very quickly. I'm Andrew Watson. I'm the training consultancy manager here at Proactis Tenders Direct. I oversee the department's activities, which is all around supporting customers to be as successful as possible, putting together their bids. And there's lots of different bits that we do to that, but I try and oversee all that good stuff. So this is what we kind of live and breathe on a daily basis, and have seen everything in terms of the good, the bad, and the ugly with every single different bid that we've analysed. I'll hand over to Alistair, who's going to add the real value today, and let him introduce himself.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. My name's Alistair O'Donnell. I'm the bid manager within Andrew's team, and I deal more with the consultancy side of things. So varied services that we can offer. We can write bids, we can review previous or live submissions, or we can just chat about answer planning and some of the nuances and ways to try and, derive a bit of value from add to the value of your bids. So
And
that's my piece.
you're a big believer in the power and the necessity of conducting proper bid reviews before things go out.
I think so. Yeah, we're all guilty for getting 4 weeks to submit a bid and spending the first two with our feet up, and then the second two tearing our hair out. So, yeah, a
Are
mature
you
bid
having
review
a
process.
pop at me there, Alistair?
A little dig, little sly dig for a Thursday. Andrew's the latter type. So no, the value of a mature bid review process can't be understated. It's very, very valuable to have up your sleeve.
Excellent. And we'll try and run through the different kind of topic areas around that, provide a bit of context, and then get into some of the detail as well in terms of providing you with some tools, techniques, and approaches to conduct bid reviews, and also making sure everyone's clear on the importance and the value of doing them as part of your submission process. So without further ado, if I can hand over to you, Alistair. Guys, I would say, yeah, do punch in the chat any questions, any in the chat or in the question function. Do punch in anything you want us to cover in the webinar. But with that, I'll keep an eye on that. I'll be driving the slides, but I'll hand over to Alistair to kind of kick us off and get going, really.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Andrew, and thanks all for your attendance and your interest in the topic. So we'll get into it. What we're going to do today is a high-level run-through of a number of areas where you can add value to your bids through conducting a bid review. It won't be exhaustive today. We've got a lot of multidisciplinary companies from different industries and sectors, so we can't get too granular in the detail, but we'll certainly cover some areas to stay aware of. We've got some templates that you can use to help the process, which we'll be issuing for you to take away with you, and we'll try and help you get under the skin of what buyers are looking for. The goal, as always, is to eke out those last few percentage points that will hopefully tip you over into winning some public sector work. So we've got the slide up here. This is a bit of an overview of just a few of the things that I'd like to run through. First of all, understanding the public sector procurement landscape. I'm going to try and offer an explanation of why we have so many rules and who these most benefit. We'll look at some bid review tips and templates to help you review with purpose. We'll interrogate and interpret the questions that we have within tender submissions. We're going to try and peel back their meaning and help us better understand client needs. What we'll then take a look at is aligning the benefits of our system and the analysis thereof with these client priorities and needs. And we'll talk a little bit about obtaining feedback that you're rightfully entitled to use in future bids, as well as obtaining feedback from your team in a live setting, so as in prior to submitting. So if we could hop on to the next slide, please. What I wanted to do, we're going to start from the start with this, and it will lead on to some areas of value, I hope. But we're really going to start from the start. So this excerpt here that you should hopefully see, the new Procurement Act, this isn't yet in force, but I thought we could take a look forward at how tenders are going to be evaluated once the Act comes out. Now, the main change from the existing Public Contracts Regulations 2015 at Regulation 67 is that we've moved on from the most economically advantageous tender to the most advantageous tender. We're going to look at the Procurement Act in more detail into the new year. Its implementation has been pushed back 4 months. So it was to come into force on the 28th of October. That's now the 24th of February 2025. It's the day before my wife's birthday, so I can keep it at the forefront of my mind. What I'd like to try and just get through is we're going to talk about the nuances of the new Act, but what we can see from this is that procurement exercises and contract awards are judged and evaluated based on the tender submission. Okay, so the focus here should be on section 2 of what you can see on your screen. And again, the importance, you just cannot undervalue the importance that they're going to make an award on the most advantageous tender or the highest scoring bid submission. Now, this includes price, social value, quality method statements. At no point does it mention awarding work to companies who buyers believe would be the best at carrying out the work, or maybe who they've seen in the news and would think that they would be really good for this work. It all rests on the formal tender submission. Now, again, this may seem really obvious, but it actually does have a big impact on the information that you include within your bids. So if we could skip on to the next slide, please. We can see then, given the instructions as laid out in the legislation, we understand that buyers cannot infer any information about our company, about your company. Now, this is to promote openness, transparency, and fairness in public sector procurement, leveling the playing field actually for startups, scale ups, and SMEs. So, if you're an SME on this course or this webinar, I understand how cumbersome and burdensome the rules are, but they actually support SME involvement. So this is only a good thing. This is also the reason why you can only contact buyers through the formal public channels. You can't contact them directly during a live tender exercise in case you sway their opinions. So a lot of effort goes into keeping these tender exercises fair. Now, the rationale behind this, just by way of completion, is to allow future audits of the purchasing exercise to reach the same result based on the stipulated evaluation criteria. Okay, so we take any personal opinions of the buyer out of the process. So next slide, please. What we can see from this then is that the only way to include our reputation, our company ethos, or to shout about how well received we are by our clients is to include this in the bid. Now, this can take the form of client testimonials, KPI attainment, data points, okay? The point being, put it in the bid. Don't assume any prior knowledge from the buyer. Even if they've got that knowledge, they're not allowed to infer information. So I spoke to somebody this week about this point, and they summarized it just perfectly straight off the bat. If it's not in the bid, it didn't happen, okay? And another example is Jamie Foxx in Law Abiding Citizen. It's not what you know, it's what you can prove in court. Okay, so it's a bit silly, but it's a really good way of looking at it. You may have all this knowledge and understanding of your company. If you're not communicating in it, then buyers can't evaluate it and you can't be scored on it. Just a final point on this slide as well, just to try and drive this point. There's a theory that I hear every so often that incumbents, so people currently delivering the work, the current incumbent contractor, win disproportionately more bids simply because they're incumbents. Maybe it's easy to keep an incumbent on a contract, or there's some additional reason why they're being awarded works over and above a strong bid submission. It's just not true. Incumbents, I agree, do win disproportionately more work. It's because their bids are better. They've spent 3, 5, 7 years understanding their clients' needs, understanding the community demographics in which they work, and they know what good looks like to their client. So they're putting this into their bids. Now, anybody on this call can go toe to toe with an incumbent bid by simply researching the client organization, reading the ITT docs and all the tender documentation in full, and by producing analysis within your writing that ties the benefits of your system with what clients want and need. Andrew, do you have any thoughts so far?
Yeah, the piece around incumbents, I was just going to say that there's a piece around incumbents where, yeah, people kind of people go. I hear a lot two different things. One is it was always going to get given to the incumbent, and we lost it on price. So those are the two things that people most. And it's a little bit kind of not lazy is maybe a tiny bit harsh, but it's quite easy to like externalize that sort of failure. But if we get everything done right, as you're saying, and we kind of maximize all we can in terms of our quality scoring, like actually, could we have overcome a price gap, and could we have dislodged an incumbent? Which is obviously kind of why we're talking about the necessity to conduct reviews and to really make sure that we pick up every single mark, because we need to be on our game. We need to be going through this process as best as we absolutely can to have the opportunities to offset a price gap and or to dislodge an incumbent who does have that knowledge to hand. We've got to work a little bit harder and do the reviews and check that our bids are including all the things that we've had to work a little bit harder to get in there than an incumbent does. So it's just about a little bit of a head start that they have, but doesn't mean you can't overcome it with things like very good quality bid reviews.
Yeah.
Um, Sorry, I'll just skip on to the next slide as well, Alistair. So there's a few different, in terms of conducting a bid review, there's various different bits and pieces and tools and templates and things that we could have worked through before we get to that point that we can sort of refer back to and use to aid us in that process. That's right.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And a lot of the tools that we can use to support our review are some similar tools that would have been used for writing, planning, even making a decision on whether or not we should bid. You'll also see on the screen, if you have attended previous webinars, there's some new extra resources here as well. So as we've said, the bid review template will be uploaded. That'll be doing the rounds at the end. So you can download this, take it away with you. So I'll talk through them very, very high level. Like I say, we can provide you with more information on this. It's all over our website as well. If you want specific information on compliance matrices, call us, have a quick Google, and we'd be happy to talk you through it. So your compliance matrix, this would have been completed in the planning stages, okay? And it can now be used as a checklist to make sure that every compliance related detail you took down has appeared in your response and in the manner expected by the client, okay? Your bid no bid matrix would have been completed as you made your bid decision, so quite early in the process. This will contain details on the positives that you perceived of contracting with this buyer and the benefits you believe that your company can bring. So it's always a pretty handy document, especially for considering win themes, any USPs you want to include, unique selling points. Content plan templates, now these should be made for each response. These can now be reviewed and responses checked against these to ensure that you've included everything that you set out to do. I'm bad for once I get writing, get the bit between your teeth, you go off on a tangent, you start researching something, try and find a quote, and you've maybe forgotten that last point to include. So these tools all become checklists that you run through. Now, the bid review template, which we've spoken about, really good document. It's excellent for a couple of reasons. The first is looking at your response through a few different lenses and analysing your bid from different angles and different approaches. Very, very helpful. It's also really good for having non-expert colleagues review your submission, and we'll discuss this. Now, the detailed client research that you'll hopefully have conducted should hopefully have led you to a couple of client-specific and personalized win themes that you're looking to convey throughout your response. So always look back on this research and make sure that you're incorporating your findings. Again, this just allows us to tie in a bit closer with the client, make a personalized, bespoke statement that really suits them and really pins their ears back. Okay, oh, this is for us, this bid is for us. And then finally, a complete understanding of your service offering and your relative place in the industry will help you angle your analysis. So a couple of examples, this isn't going to be true across the board, but one might be that smaller companies can sometimes provide more personalized customer service to clients, whereas larger companies may hold better supply chain contingency arrangements. Okay, now these are made up, but just get thinking, what's our relative place within the industry and how do we turn that into a benefit for the client? Okay, whatever your USP is, whatever sets you apart from your competitors, this is the time to shout out about it. Okay, so if we can move on to the next slide, please.
I can, Alistair, just quickly, there's quite a few different questions coming. I can just rattle through a couple of quick ones. The classic webinar question that we always get in multiple instances is the webinar going to be recorded and will it be available later? Absolutely not. No, I'm only joking. Yes, it will. So what will happen is you'll get a link in the, I don't know if it's immediately after the webinar, but certainly within a day or two, you'll get a link which will allow you access to watch the recording at your leisure. So yeah, that'll be fine. You can definitely watch it again. And the other question that came in quite interesting was, are there going to be any processes put in place to ensure that they really just evaluate the bid and not the company? So, and are there any processes to be put in place in brackets, e.g., the name of the bidder deleted to ensure they really just evaluate the bid and not the company? Just a little bit of perspective on this. So a lot of the time, if it's being run properly, a procurement's run properly, it's being run through a dedicated procurement tool, then there will be a way for the questions and the answers will be evaluated. They can be split up and sent to different people, and each answer will be evaluated as a standalone piece. As far as I'm aware, there's nothing that happens just now that goes in and like redacts the buyer, the supplier's names from the answers that are then distributed to evaluators. So as far as I'm aware, that doesn't happen just now, and I don't know that there's a plan for that to happen. So if you'd written in a given answer your company's name, as you potentially would in most of it or some of your answers, that would be visible. And I don't think there's anything in place to redact that through the system. But obviously, if it's going through like a formal system, it's being pushed out to the evaluators, dependent on which question should go to which evaluator. All that's been preset. It's much more structured. There will be recording of the answers that they put down, and how those were moderated and the reasons for them being moderated. So the system will record what each individual evaluator gave in terms of a scoring against the answer, how those were aggregated, and then if there was any adjustment to the aggregation, if there was any moderation, the comments around that would be recorded too. This is like a sort of reasonably like well-functioning procurement system would have all that in it. So in terms of the kind of audit piece that Alistair was talking about, in terms of the justification, that stuff would all be there. But it's a good question you raise in terms of absolutely having no idea who it is, it being completely blind. Not potentially not, but there's most systems in place so that it's not so that you have to be able to justify the answers. There's a good number more questions, and I'll come on to a few more in a minute, Alistair, but I'll let you carry on for now if that's best.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So yeah, we'll have a look at detailed editing. Now this slide is just to give you an idea of where and when to spend your resources, just to help you review as efficiently as you can. So I would suggest a high level review of your strategy, your win themes, differentiators, USPs, should come first, okay? As this information, it's most likely to be changed during a review. Are we getting our messaging across? Is our win theme, prevalent? Have we answered all parts of the questions? This might lead to, or is more likely to lead to changes being made. Only once you've finalised your writing, I would suggest having a second spin through it, reviewing it for spelling, grammar, cadence, tone, flow. It's quite difficult for some of these more technical responses to keep a kind of upbeat conversational tone. Depends how you want to write, but just read it again for flow, read it from the start, and check that you're telling your story appropriately, in order, and in response to the buyer's questions. Sometimes at this point, having a colleague read it to provide a bit of a fresh-eyed perspective can really sense check that your writing is properly conveying your meaning. So we'll move on to the next slide if we could. Now, this is quite a important element. Firstly, well, we'll go into it. So there's two key elements that you'll all be familiar with regarding bidding into the public sector. The first is compliance, and the second is competitiveness. Now, I suggest conducting a detailed review of your bid submissions, looking through the lens of both. So with compliance, the main tool here that we'll use is our compliance matrix. So it's one of these old cliches that the effort that you put into this at the start is really going to decide how easy the process is for you. So this is something I absolutely do recommend putting a bit of resource into and really having a good think about it. And then you can work from the compliance matrix. You no longer need to scrutinize the whole, tender documentation. You've got it into this document. So you're checking here, it's little things. You're checking that you've correctly completed the supplier questionnaire, that you've understood the questions, which we'll come to, and that you've complied with any word limits, font sizing, font requirements. Again, some of these rules can feel a little bit overly prescriptive, but the point is, as we've discussed, it keeps the process open, transparent, and fair. Okay, so it's very important, and it's very important that we adhere to these. Now, some tenders will request supporting documentation by way of separate uploads. Others will expressly bar supplementary information. Some buyers include text within images as being within the word count. Others don't, okay? You're also checking at this stage, how are we going to return this tender? How do I get this to the buyer? Now, typically the majority of tenders are facilitated through online portals. A general rule is they'll normally go back to where they came from. So wherever you downloaded the tender documentation, expect to return your submission to the same place. Again, within this, some portals, I know ours does, ProContract, will have embedded questions to be completed online. So always make a point to click Start My Submission and have a good snoop around the portal. Some have extra compliance work that you won't find until you go to upload. Now, if that's the morning of, which I've been there, that can turn into a bit of a stressy morning. Now, again, as with all of the advice today, every tender is different. So some won't have these extended or embedded questions, but there will be other opportunities where you'll be so glad that you that you checked. And then just on the compliance piece, some other tenders will be issued and returned via email. Okay, this is still fairly common. The guidance here is to read all the documents, extrapolate this information early doors, and fire it into a compliance matrix. This is then used as a checklist for future compliance as you conduct your bid review. You've got it all at your fingertips, and you can make sure that you're working this information in your bid submission. Secondly, reviewing for competitiveness. The core areas of your bid that we're going to focus on here would be the analysis that you provide of the benefits of your solution. Now, we can use a bit of creativity here to link the benefits of our solution with known client ambitions or strategies, okay, that we've uncovered through reading the tender pack and carrying out some additional client research. So it helps to carry out a little bit more research than you normally would over and above the literature contained within the tender notice or the documentation pack. However, I would say any preamble or client introduction should still be read and understood. This will often signpost you to the pertinent and important information. Even little things, get onto the client's sustainability policy, get onto their social value approach, have a look for any company mission, vision, and values, even their articles of association. Quoting directly from clients' own strategies is quite impressive, and it demonstrates a real breadth to your research and a personalization to your bid submission. It also immediately separates you from speculative tenderers who may be firing from the hip with blanket bid responses sent out for every opportunity. Okay, these don't tend to win much work. So once we've identified buyer preferences or strategies, we can now tie in the analysis of our systems with these. So as an example, we could read a sentence from the ITT that states that the client is a forward-looking sustainability champion within their sector with bold and ambitious targets towards decarbonisation. That's fine. That's good information. We can work with that. However, for some extra marks, you could augment this with some additional research on the client by mentioning specifics from within their sustainability targets. So these might be renewable energy sources, maybe air source heat pumps or solar panels, or the client might be looking to cut commuted mileage throughout theirs and your supply chain. They might even be looking for a quantified reduction in carbon by a set date. So having these specifics and having these particulars allows you to angle your analysis to tie in the benefits of your system with what we know about the client. Okay, so this is where the extra marks bleed out, is keeping the benefits of your solution and the benefits of a partnership with you into how this is going to help the client achieve their strategic aims. Okay, so the aim here is to support clients in achieving their own strategies through a partnership with your companies and taking these needs from their own policies. Now, a final point on both compliance and competitiveness in this element is the evaluation criteria and aligning your responses with these. So a point that we have touched upon in previous webinars, but it bears repeating here, is that buyers' evaluation criteria vary wildly. They're so different. Even the same buyer for a separate opportunity, it can change. Um, However, they will always include their evaluation criteria within the ITT. So these buzzwords are really clear indicators of how and where the marks will be appointed, which allows us to angle our delivery or the communication thereof to hit these points. Okay. So from a compliance element, if you can hit each point within the criteria, you're on your way to building an extremely strong bid. And these are your signposts. You know, this is how you need to angle your bid and compile your bid. Now, from a competition standpoint, buyers will provide evaluation criteria for the full range of scores that they can award, sometimes out of 5, out of 10, some out of 7. This allows you to almost sense check which score you anticipate receiving. So the more elements within the evaluation criteria that you can comfortably satisfy and back up, the higher the scoring. So we've mentioned again that the evaluation criteria varies. I'll give you some examples and then maybe some ideas of how you would go about responding to these. So I've seen this month, I've seen evaluation criteria seeking tender responses that demonstrate capability and capacity. So these are quite common buzzwords. So capability and capacity. To my mind, that's a methodological response. I would talk about team structure, staffing levels, competencies. From this, you can get into training, onboarding, recruitment, okay? Capability, how good are we at what we do? Capacity, how many of us are there? Where are we? How quickly can we get to your site? What's our contingency arrangements? What if someone calls in sick? So you see already, it just cascades and builds. Now, some evaluation criteria might look for innovative solutions. So here we discuss USPs, unique selling points, differentiators, any innovative or novel solutions. Within this, you could include any awards that you've maybe won, that the company's won. Get it in the bid. Some and most look for tender responses substantiated with relevant evidence. So here you dig out the case studies, the testimonials, the data points, graphs, charts, make it believable, make your submission credible. And some evaluation criteria, and again, this is not exhaustive, there are so many more, but some will look for a response which provides assurances to the buyer of successful contract delivery. So I would suggest that we're looking to angle our analysis towards risk management, contingency arrangements, business continuity, and disaster recovery. Okay, so seeing what the buyer prioritizes by way of their evaluation criteria is such a good indication of how you should craft your response. Now, a quick caveat on this is I have said that we're looking for them to be substantiated with relevant evidence. Don't wait to be told to do that. Don't wait to see that in the evaluation criteria. The best practice advice is do this for every tender submission. Make a statement of fact, explain how this is going to benefit the client, back it up with evidence, and you're there. So we'll move on to the next slide.
Alistair,
Yes,
there's
yeah.
there's a there's a there's a really good question coming that's gonna test you. It's gonna put you on the spot. So let me tell you the question.
Yeah, let's do it
Some
live then.
Let's do it like this is not a plant. This is difficult. You see if Alistair can think on his feet. Uh, Sometimes the timescales provided are extremely tight and will inhibit completing all of the tasks being suggested. What would be the top three activities to focus on when time is against you?
Top
I'm sort of
three.
assuming it's relating to the competitiveness bullet points, but I'm not entirely sure. Top three activities to focus on when time is against you.
Yeah, I would say, and I struggled getting my head around this point until very recently. Compliance matrices, response plans, response content plans. I thought they were a waste of time, but they're not. They're not. They save time. They really do. They save you time. So I would say a compliance matrix. Your bid could be 100% quality scored. If it's non-compliant, no one would ever know that. So take compliance seriously. We need to get our foot in the door, and I think a compliance matrix is a really quite important, very important aspect to focus on. To my mind, I am blessed with a bit of time for these opportunities. This is all I do. I'm not running my own businesses like our webinar attendees. I'm not running payroll, dealing with complaints. This is what I do. So I quite enjoy a bit of detailed client research as well. And then once you understand your technical solution design, which everybody will, the more you read up on clients, the more you can start linking these things together. It's thinking, we do that. We know you prioritize fair working practices, you prioritize payment of the living wage. So do we, and the connections will start building quite organically when you do it that way.
Mhm.
And a third, would you like to include a third,
The
Andrew?
la-
Play the Uno
the last
reverse card.
the the last point on the competitive piece, a really quick way to pick up loads of extra marks is spending the time focusing on the evaluation criteria. So if you don't have time to do like rafts and rafts of research into relevant papers or relevant market trends, then so be it. Leave that. But if you can spend a little bit of time and actually like really focus on the evaluation criteria and make sure that you plan and write your answers against that criteria, that's going to lift your marks for a very small time investment. So you should be focusing on, I agree with the answer planning, sort of a little bit of research on the client, and evaluation criteria. It, the only other one I would include is the really important one is obviously the compliance matrix would do is that make sure your answers are written to the question, written to the specification, written to the evaluation criteria. So if you get no time, do those three things and go on their website and put a little bit of extra research in it, and you can get an awful lot of marks just doing that with very low effort, high reward type pieces. So that's the areas I would focus on. Great question, though. Love it. I'll let you move on. There's really good questions coming, guys. We've got a clever bunch on the line today, a clever bunch on the webinar today. I'll come back to them. I'll let you crack on, and we'll do a few more in a minute or two.
Yeah, great. Good questions though, because it's easy for me to prattle on about this romantic notion of having all this time to complete it, but the real life application is you get between 2 to 4 weeks for these things. Sometimes they're just rack 'em and stack 'em. So this is romantic best practice, but there needs to be an application in the real world as well. So yeah, great questions, keep them coming. What I wanted to do as well is just talk a little bit about how we can interpret and interrogate questions and maybe uncover a deeper meaning, not so much a hidden meaning, but a deeper meaning, which is going to help us form our analysis, to better answer what the buyer is asking. So I've used supply chain management as an example. So let's get into it. Now, I've got written here, a bit of a skill that we all need to develop when bidding into public sector procurement is reading the minds of buyers, okay? But what I mean by this is learning how to properly interrogate the wording of questions set within the supplier questionnaire, which this is, and I've also seen it in qualitative responses. So we often need to peel back a few layers to reveal a potential inner meaning of a question. Now, this isn't always going to be applicable. Some can be taken at face value, but if you're able to maybe scrutinize these things quite effectively and really understand what a buyer's asking of you, the analysis that you provide of your solution design should be able to align more closely with perceived buyer ambitions and strategic aims, okay, because you understand them. So this kind of started in my brain a couple of years ago. And to give you an example, it's out of date now, it was repealed in July 2023, but there's an old procurement policy note 0213, and this looked into buyers managing supplier financial risk. So it was a helpful document for buyers. Okay, so we don't need to worry too much about them, although it's got some really good info on how suppliers can prove it. And now, as it turns out, for buyers to audit or scrutinize supplier financial risk, there are multiple ways for buyers to demonstrate this, ranging from audited accounts, profit and loss accounts, forward-looking projections, balance sheets, parent company guarantees, whatever. It's quite a wide range of permissible evidence. And I realized that sometimes the information being requested isn't all that buyers are looking to evaluate, but rather can be an instrument to demonstrate a deeper meaning. So here's our audited accounts for the last 3 years, but really, buyers are using this to evaluate your fiscal risk. And it made me wonder what else they might be trying to evaluate without necessarily asking for it straight up. So if we take the response on the screen about supply chain management, now, as we know, a win theme of this webinar is that it's only the information contained in the bid that can be evaluated. So let's make sure that we leave no stone unturned and really signpost buyers through our analysis to the benefits of working with us. So, as I've said, this question will come up in formal quality in supplier questionnaires, and I've also seen it crop up as a question in its own right within quality method statements as well, the qualitative response. You're very likely to come up against this question. Now, I would suggest that most supply chain management questions are looking for responses that satisfy the buyer with regards to risks. Now, these can be risks associated with time and cost overruns, poor quality, modern slavery, mid-contract supplier liquidation, mid-contract price rises, okay? So while we're responding to a question about supply chain management, the analysis and the client-specific benefits of our approach should actually be tied back to risk management and project continuity. That's what the buyer wants to know. Are you in enough control of your supply chain that if one of your suppliers goes bust, is that going to impact us? Or do you have procedures in place? So this presents an opportunity to discuss our strategy to mitigate, manage, or remove risk from our supply chains. Now, one idea could be that we vet all prospective partners, then provide company-specific and client-specific training to them. We could have suppliers and or subcontractors accept client-specified KPIs as a condition of operating on the contract. We could even replicate service level agreement terms, contract terms within subcontracts. So the client's contract terms are being cascaded throughout your supply chain, which helps you ensure that even non-directly employed members of your team are upholding client standards. The point being, we retain a large degree of control over supplier standards, vetting them first to make sure we're comfortable that they're low risk. Now, what do we do if we can't remove risk? We spread it. So highlight your contingency arrangements within your operations. What if your haulage company goes bust? One idea would be that you may wish to have a robust supply chain with multiple suppliers onboarded who can provide the same standard of service delivery as your main supplier. You may even have multidisciplinary subcontractors who can provide emergency coverage, all with the view to ensuring continuity in the client's project. It always comes back to a benefit to the client. Now, what we're doing here is we're answering the question in a way that is compliant by detailing or by stating the detail around our supply chain management processes. It may be underpinned by an internal policy document. However, what we're doing as well is we're using the opportunity to signpost to buyers how this benefits them and demonstrating what they stand to gain from a partnership with us. Andrew, anything from yourself on that?
No, Alistair, no, I'm fine. I was just I was keeping an eye on the questions coming in, so I've got a couple more of those though. We can just have a quick look at. Let's have a look. Someone said, "What does S?" I missed what SQ detail means, which is just selection questionnaire. So just the standard questions that you're going to see appear time and time again when you're putting together responses. So just to flag that one, and a little bit of a different question, but maybe a bit soon. But why do public sector buyers use a framework approach, then use call-offs? Invariably, the detail of the proposal has already been provided in the original. It feels like an unnecessary repetition. Um, so so a framework will run for like a set period of time, a set number of years typically, and with that in mind, it might be the buying organisation. They know they're going to have lots of different work that the framework can cover in terms of a broad scope, but the actual specifics about the projects that are going to be required, the services or goods that are going to be required, might not be all bottomed out across that 4-year period. So they want to have an overarching agreement in place and then flexibility as to when they request work packages or work packets and at what scale during that 4-year period. So it's to give the organization a bit more flexibility. It might be when you see framework ones that the questions you have to answer to apply to the framework are a little bit more high level or a little bit more covering a sort of generic piece, whereas then they'll ask questions very specifically around how you deliver the products or services, relating to an actual call off within the framework. So I know it feels a bit like repetition, that's a fair point, but it's to give the authorities the sort of flexibility to conduct the procurements over the length of the framework without necessarily knowing exactly all the details of them before they start it. But good question. Um, just it's not really a question, but there's a nice point. So one of the participants in the webinar today does actually evaluate bids as well. Boo, sits on the other side, and the other chair. I'm only joking, and has put in the comment. He's put in a couple of comments. One of them was around a lot of the time the logos and names of the company, the seller, the supplier, are plastered all over anything. So the process of redacting, if that ever was to be done, would be pretty tricky, which is fair. And the other one was, I always encourage the bid drafters, after ensuring basic compliance and making sure the questions are answered, to focus on what from our bid will demonstrate the value the client will get from us, and what's the evidence to back that up, which is very sound advice. Do you agree, Alistair?
Yeah,
That's solid. That's
yeah.
very solid. It's a really good way to think about it. Nice, succinctly put. Okay, there are, just to move on then, Alistair, we've got some questions up on the screen. These are the questions that form basically the high level editing checklist that I will, if the technology allows, be putting into the attachment function of the webinar for you guys to grab for free. Welcome from us. Send us a drinks voucher. I'm only joking. That will be, so I'll put that in the chat shortly. This is the list of the questions that are found in that template that you can use against evaluating individual answers yourself before submission to see what kind of to see if they hit all of the right parts. If you can answer in the affirmative across this range of questions for all of your answers that you put in as a submission, you're going to be looking real strong. Your answers are going to score really, really well. Alistair, do you want to run through, while I look at the extra questions that have come in, do you want to run through some of these ones, just offer a little bit of an explanation about them, some of these ones, so people understand, kind of a little bit more of the detail about how do they interpret that question when they're when they're reviewing their own answers?
Yeah, yeah. So this template works really well for reviewing your own answers, helping you review with a bit of purpose, but it's also good for having colleagues review them as well. I've had bid responses reviewed very helpfully by colleagues in the past, and the whole direction shifts of the bid, or there's new win themes introduced, and I think that's not what I was asking for. I've got the win themes, I understand the direction, but this is what I want to check. So these questions, this checklist is really quite good for just keeping potential non-expert reviewers, keeping them honest. These are good questions to ask yourself rather than having any subjective or personal opinions creep in. So some examples: are we talking about the buyer first and ourselves second? Now this is a great reminder to mold your responses around the client's need, as we've had from the comment in demonstrating the value, okay? And it's a very simple trick to try and get yourself into the habit of, but using the client's name. Using the client's name as often as you can will enable you to mold the bid around how you're going to support the client in achieving their aims. Using your own name as well, as we've discussed, is very strong. I think it helps buyers associate the standard of your bid with your company name. But the key point in all of this is prioritizing the buyer throughout your response. Consider not here's what we can do, but more here's what we can do for you. And I think that just keeps you honest, keeps you on the right tracks. A second one would be, does it take the reader on an end-to-end journey from their perspective? So again, we're keeping the buyer, evaluator, reader as our focus, and we're making sure that the response is comprehensive. Now, if you introduce a theme to your submission, a win theme, a differentiator, a unique selling point, if you introduce a theme to your submission, stick with it and close it off by the end. There needs to always be a point to what you're saying. So consider what you're trying to achieve through your language. Can we tie our solution design or strategic approach into a wider company or corporate strategy? Does the buyer understand and crucially believe in what's going to be delivered based on what's written in the bid? Have we covered all bases? Okay, this end-to-end journey. Close the circle. If you start something, close it off. And are the benefits of our system sufficiently clear and well evidenced? So we touched on evidence a little bit earlier in the webinar. It remains absolutely crucial for a robust and credible bid submission. So in sticking with our theme earlier, I'm going to keep saying it: if you want it evaluated, put it in the bid. Whatever or whenever you make a claim about your company's ability, back this up with evidence. Blend credibility and believability to your writing. So you can provide details of a previous client, which would allow the buyer to verify the information that you're providing. This goes then from being a one-dimensional paragraph in a piece of paper to actually being believable and verifiable information. So again, your client testimonials, KPI adherence, customer satisfaction results, awards, any interviews that you've done, anytime you've been on the news or in the paper, all central to proving the points that you're making. And as Andrew said, through this internal review and feedback process, we're trying to turn any no's to the questions on the screen to yeses. Now, last slide, just a piece on requesting feedback externally. Okay, so that's a little bit about having your team help you, gaining that fresh eye perspective. There's a piece on requesting feedback from buying organizations. So your rights are being strengthened under the new Procurement Act. Buyers are being reminded of their duties to cultivate good working partnerships with suppliers in their area. More competition is a good thing. It breeds innovation, keeps costs sensible, and raises standards. So the new Act is seeking to really stoke this and lower barriers to entry for SME involvement in a bid to raise standards in the industry. So if you don't receive feedback as a matter of course from buyers, look, it happens. Buyers are busy like us. It's a busy job. Or if you feel the feedback that you receive is substandard, you're entitled to request and receive formal feedback on your bids, even under the current legislation. Your rights are being strengthened in the new Act, but it's a continuation of a theme. You still have these rights today. Our advice is stay politely persistent and request feedback so that you might develop strategies towards continual improvement, which will in turn benefit the buying organization into the future. Okay, so form your requests around the need for this feedback, which is going to help you buy benefit the buyer. So this seems like a great place to stop. I've bored myself into submission, so I can't imagine how you're all feeling. But I'll hand back over to Andrew for a round off, and thank you for your attendance at today's webinar and your
We've got,
continued interest.
Alistair, we've got a couple of minutes left. We've got loads more questions.
Oh God.
Don't be
Okay.
so eager. Don't
Well,
be
I'm done.
so eager. No, no, you got to answer this question. We've had another. Honestly,
Go on.
sometimes the questions we get in are a little bit hard work. But but there's been some really good questions. So, Alistair put you on the spot, and there is a right and a wrong answer to this. What proportion of bid writing time do you think is a good amount of time for review and edit?
Oh, this is an APMP question. What is it? Is it
There's a
does
best
planning
practice
sit at
answer
about
to this.
yeah. So planning sits at about 15 to 20 if memory serves. So let's go in with 25 to 30%, 25%
Of the overall project time.
of the overall project time.
Is that what you
But I can't
mean?
can't change my mind now, can I? Yeah, maybe less. Between 20
I
and 25.
I think I like to see squirm. No, it will vary from project to project, but yeah, I would agree with that as a ballpark. So if you think you're very roughly, you've got maybe uh, a quarter of the time doing sort of planning and research activities, half of the time writing, and then a quarter of the time doing the editing and review. That's very, very rough, and there's the subcategory, subdivisions within that. But I think yeah, 20 to 25%. You're just it's just never going to be right first time. There's going to be both like high and high level things to change about it, and also like errors and stuff to make sure get out there. But actually going through that process and making sure does it hit all the points that need to, getting people to go through that editing checklist with you, all that type of good stuff. Let me tee you up with another question because I need to make sure I'm going to try and use the tech to put the editing checklist into the attachment so everyone can grab that before we finish as well. Um, Let me see. This is a good question which relates to editing, Alistair. I'll let you take as long as you do this one while I get this attachment. How do you handle a situation where you are given word limits, but your response doesn't really pass the message as when you reach the max words? My answer to this, by the way, guys, is just go way over the word limit. No one minds. That's a joke. Don't do that. That's a terrible idea. You'll get absolutely slayed. Do not do that. I'll let Alistair give you a proper factually accurate answer. Please, guys, don't do that and say I told you to do it. Don't do that. It was a joke.
Yeah, you'd be crucified for that. Sometimes, see 500 word responses, 1,000 word responses, you can be punchy. Now, I write in prose and I try and write quite conversationally. Sometimes you just don't have an opportunity to do that. So lists are good. Images are very good as well, charts and graphs. And what I do quite like to do as part of my review process is if I'm way over the word limits, is take out unnecessary words. So things like we will do our best, we will endeavor to provide, we will, we will covers that. And it actually covers it in stronger detail. There's no, we won't endeavor, we're just going to do it. So you'll be quite surprised if you go through it with a bit of a brutal editing attitude where you can really start shaving words. So lists, graphs, images, all these good things really help, but also just cut out the unnecessary language, and it slips into all of our language, all of our written responses. So just go through it, and you'll be absolutely amazed how many more words you can free up. But it's tough because low word limits disproportionately affect well set up companies. It's a bit of a juxtaposition in the industry that if you've got a lot to say about yourself, you're going to be the worst affected by a low word limit. And a startup company or someone who's maybe a bit ambivalent to the process, they could stick 500 words in, and it's not a true reflection. You might need 2,000 words to get your point across. So strip it out, strip all the unnecessary language out, be punchy, bullets, lists, just get the point across. Don't worry about if the buyer likes you, and don't worry about if they're having an easy time reading it. They've set the word limits, so sometimes it's just going to need to be bang, 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 quite punchy.
Just to add to that, I agree with all of that. That's really good advice. The only thing I was going to add is, as well as like lists and bullets and diagrams, like actually you you can do tables. Like, so if you think about it, you might be able to put quite a lot of information in a table with, however many, 3 or 4 columns in it, where you can just then put like topic area, keywords. It's like a bullet list, but a little bit more structured, right? But if you think about it, dependent on the information you've got to convey, you might be able to convey, stuff across several paragraphs. You might be able to put that in a table. It might be able to reduce the word count by a half or 3/4 even. So do get creative with it, and that's really what you have to do when you've got a lot of information with these really low word count answers. They are a difficulty in themselves to do. Let me see. We are really tight for time. There's loads more questions. Just so I've done something in the webinar. There's there's a couple of different questions writing about AI, using AI for generating responses, which is obviously kind of something that's going to come more and more. There are some specific tools that sort of claim in one way or another that they are using AI to help you with responses. It is fairly new. It's a bit in its infancy, this sort of stuff. Um, you have to be careful, especially if you're using the kind of generic free access AI tools. Typically, you can spot those answers a mile away because they're just pulling generic information off the internet. And Alistair's had some first-hand experience where he's been asked to review answers. He's like, these have all been written by AI. They're a little bit junky. So be careful. It can stand out really like a sore thumb. It's not to say that AI doesn't have its place and won't have its place more increasingly within bid writing. But do be careful. It's not a panacea. It doesn't mean that you can just wave a magic wand and you'll have high quality answers. You need to be careful about, is this pulling relevant information? Is it pulling accurate information? And does it do all of the things that does it help me do the things that I need my answers to look like when we looked at that bid review checklist as well, folks? So use well, but use with caution. There's more just to round up then, folks, because we have run out of time now. The questions have been fabulous. I really do, Alistair and myself really do appreciate that. If you want to carry on the conversation, there's a telephone number, and bid support at tendersdirect.co.uk is our email address. We'll try and do a follow up with everyone as well. There's been quite a lot of questions we've not had a chance to get to just because of the number of people on the webinar and the number of folk that have come. Hopefully everyone can see in the attachments, the little paperclip icon, you can see the attachment, the high level editing checklist, which we've got. Yes, I'm getting some thumbs up. Guys, we're loving this tech as well. We've just upgraded, it's going well. So you can download that one. Perfect, guys. Download away, grab it while it's free. After today, it's £50. I'm only joking. Yes. Oh, thumbs up are going crazy. This is brilliant, guys. Thank you so much. So on that note, we'll round off. We will try and reach out, get some more questions answered, see if anyone wants any support. Alistair can support people directly as well on projects if you've got any of those that you need, and we can reach out and just let you know a little bit more if you've got any more questions or anything you want us to cover that we haven't managed to. Loving the emojis, guys. Feeling very privileged to get such a positive response. But on that note, it is now 2 o'clock. I'll say Thank you very, very much for taking the time to attend and stick with us. So goodbye from me, Alistair.
Yeah, goodbye for myself, and thank you for your interest. Much appreciated, and we'll
Yeah,
see you at the next one.
yeah, it's been a real pleasure, guys. Hopefully, you've been able to grab that Excel as well. Hopefully, that's worked for you. And yeah, we'll hope to carry on the conversation with lots of you in the coming days and weeks as well. Thank you so much for your attendance, and we'll see you at the next one in either October or November. Thanks again. Bye for now.
Cheers.